Well, we'll get started with just the roll call and a couple announcements.
Should I go ahead with the roll call?
No, just 1 minute.
Okay.
Okay. Again, we are going to start with calling this our special school board meeting for the superintendent search, Monday, December 16th at 5:07. And we'll start with roll call. Member Oswald?
Member Durek Eder.
Here.
Member Kirby.
Here.
Chair Loeffler-Kemp. Member Lofald. Here. I am here. Member Sandston.
Here.
Member Trinka.
Here.
We are all here and we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you all again, first of all, for committing to being here with us tonight. And I think just to first do a check that everyone's understanding is that this would be about a 90-minute meeting, and everyone's good for that? Okay. If we need to go longer, or if we have more questions, of course we can, but just so everyone knows that's what we had agreed to. Okay. So we did get a handout of the planning agenda with BWP, and just kind of from the board again, we are excited to begin this process with you, Kathleen and Nick, and look forward to this meeting being an opportunity for us to not only do planning, but also to get to know each other a little bit more, build some relationships, but definitely see this as a process between the board, our HR director, Tim Swirsky, our communications director, Katie Kaufman here, and so an opportunity to do the planning as we move forward. And so I'm going to turn this over to Nick and Kathleen, and then as we get into more kind of the questions, we're going to just, we'll do like we traditionally do during our meetings, turn your light on. We'll call on each other or I'll call on each other that way to kind of keep the process moving as well. But at this point, would you like us to go around again, or do the nameplates out there? Okay. And then we'll just turn it over to you both. And again, thank you.
Well, I'd like to begin by thanking you for having trust in us to conduct what I believe I said before is probably one of the greatest decisions you'll ever have an opportunity to contribute to. And I want to begin by stating something that should be understood, but Nick and I have known in our experience it always isn't. So I'm going to start with the main thing being the main thing, and that is you have a Board of Education policy, 8000, which specifically says the responsibility of selecting the next superintendent of schools is yours. So it's critically important, and I thank you for all being in the room. We need you all in the room to help with this very important decision. So thank you so much. The citizens of your community have elected you to represent them. You have a responsibility and a policy, so know that this is big, really, really big. So thank you all for being here. We're very grateful for that. We have lots of things to discuss. Some will go much faster than others, and if there's any confusion whatsoever, please stop us and ask for clarification. I also want to say you'll see a lot of things on here. Nick and I are going to do the heavy lifting for you. You're not going to have to be creating all of these things. We're going to be doing that for you. This is a very comprehensive list, if you will, because we wanted to help you understand the process that you're going to be experiencing, the latitude that you have, the latitude that you don't have in some regards, but it's going to be a lot of information for you and some guidance for us. So with that being said, I had received a communication that the liaisons were going to be Jill, Alana, and Tim. And I just want to confirm that that is going to be the case, because typically we work with the Board of Education president. So we want to make sure that that is accurate.
I would love to hear more about that definition of what we want. I know we made a motion at the last meeting, but I found it to be really cumbersome this past month to work as a liaison when I'm not in control of all aspects either, and I felt like I was doubling with having to connect with our chair, with our staff to do things, and I just wasn't ready. I didn't have a lot of the data, like what's clearly not an appropriate email or a Google Doc to get all of the feedback. Is that an email, a circular email? So I would love to hear from my other board members, and I'd also like some clarification where was it our intent that we have liaisons that what does that mean? Does that mean we just relate the information that we get from each other, or and will that preclude any one of us to be a board chair in our next session, or a clerk, or any of that leadership? So what is the wish of our colleagues to revisit liaison? I found it like it caught me off guard. I mean, we got the email, I think, the day after our vote, and we're trying to communicate, and that's not how, I just found it cumbersome, where I would like to know what my colleagues want to do.
And I'm going to call on Kathleen. I'll just add, Melinda isn't here, and we also had that challenge of our staff person that coordinates a lot of meetings and things for us coming and going about this time. But I know that there was just some concern that the way we function as a board, that their role remains pretty critical, because they know what spaces are going to be used, and they have a lot of kind of control of our setting up our meetings and all of that. So there's that piece of it that, kind of speaking on behalf of Melinda and Tim, might have something to add. But go ahead, Kathleen.
I'm going to ask Nick to jump in if he wants to as well. So, Madam Chair, let me define for you what a liaison means. It's a series of people that will do coordinating or bring to us any clarification, for example, that the board might need. At some point in time, for an example, you're going to be inviting finalists to Duluth. You'll probably show them the community, they'll visit some schools, and we'll get into the other dynamics about what that day might look like. But I need somebody that I can call. In this instance, it might be a Jackie, to say, all right, you're going to need to set up hotel reservations for these candidates. You're going to need to provide a venue where perhaps the board is going to take the candidate to dinner and conduct a final interview. It might be, if you choose to have focus groups, I need to know who I can go to say, can you provide a venue or venues within the district where we can meet with groups of people? We're going to need a setting like this. How many people? I need somebody to talk to your principals about getting us names of parents. I need somebody to make sure that all these people that you want engaged to provide you information that in an advisory capacity, who's going to be doing that? It may be your communications person who I might be saying, if we do an online survey, we're going to need to be posting this. Is there anything we need to know in order to do that and take it down? It might be Tim with regard to are there any specific policies that we need to be following in the area of HR that we need to notify? And it might be, in many instances for us, it's been a board chair where I may say, if there are issues, please let me know, or clarifications we need. And I also want to keep you out of violating any Open Meetings Act laws whatsoever. So we look for the liaison as the go-to person to help us kind of get things done. And Jill, I think you were a bit overwhelmed when I initially contacted you. So, you know, it's going to be a variety of things, but it's more coordinating, getting information to you. Jackie got you this, put it on board book, etc. Nick, anything else?
Yeah, thank you. So to me, it would make more sense if we had like a contact list for, I mean, I guess when and I wasn't at the last meeting, but having watched it, my impression of a liaison was if there were questions, comments, concerns from the board, that we would go through you. But then, I mean, I don't think it's appropriate for Jill to be or Alana to be making hotel reservations, because then you're just a middleman. And so what if we just gave you a list of Melinda, Jackie, Tim, Jill, and Alana, here's what you go to those people for? Would that just be easier so that we're cutting out middle people, and then it's almost like a triage system?
The only thing I would ask you, while I reviewed a number of your policies, I don't know if you have a policy as to who the spokesperson for the board is. And if you have that in written policy, as I've had in other districts, then if there are concerns or queries, they all funnel through the board president. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
That's been my experience too. I think we may be talking about two different operational functions. The Melindas and the Jackies to coordinate sites, location, communication availability, because that's what you ended up inheriting. That to me, and you had a, person that wasn't in, that happens. But that, just that functionary operation piece. But yet my experience has been, the board chair has been the liaison in the event there's questions regarding spokesperson roles. But I think the majority of what we're going to be doing in this planning meeting is to make sure all voices are heard today and listened to, so that when you walk out of here, you know, yep, that's the process we're going to use, stakeholder engagement. The goal to appoint your next superintendent is this date frame from you. But as far as the communication to set up the logistics, the Jackies, I think, and Melindas will be that liaison, because they're going to be the ones coordinating your schedules. So I think there's two functionary roles we're talking about.
Thank you for clarifying that. Any other questions?
I would like
Member Sandstead?
I agree that I think we have the practical contact, and then I was the one who made the motion at the last meeting for us to name the liaisons, and my thought was that it was spokesperson on behalf of the board, and that we were going to make that affirmative selection at the meeting. And from my perspective, I was thinking about who we have trust in to make good decisions when needed, to communicate clearly to other board members, and who will bring things to the board when we need to make a decision as a whole. And so that was my thinking, and I appreciate Member Lofold and Member Oswald for stepping up, and I'm sorry if it was more than you thought, but that was where it was coming from on our end. And it was a unanimous vote from those of us who were there.
So I just like to, it wasn't as overwhelming. It was just kind of like, oh my gosh, okay, it's starting today. And, I think I sent that Google Doc out right away. And it was like, oh, but I didn't check with Melinda to see, what else needed, or if it was. So, and you know what? I'm pretty darn good at making hotel reservations. I've been doing, but that's okay. I don't necessarily, I want to engage more fully in finding our next superintendent. I think the question, and again, the other question is, and I know this is December, and I'm not, so that's who we will look for when you select a board chair at our January meeting. Is if the board chair also then has to have the trust and the responsibility of being open and willing to communicate with all board members in the best interest of finding the best superintendent, then that's how we approach our January meeting, I would think. And we don't necessarily need a liaison unless down the road in late January or February we find that our board chair is overwhelmed with other issues confronting the board, and we might want to bring in a board member that can also then continue this process. I don't know. I'm just trying to think out loud, because I do know that I don't know what my board thinks about who's board chair versus who's liaison versus any of those other roles that we're going to look at in January. Or we just might just let it play out and see where that goes.
Member Trinka?
Thank you. I think the ambiguity around letting it play out is just going to create the fact for us to need to have this discussion again in a month. I think, I kind of consider it that the two of you are the head of this committee almost. And so I feel totally comfortable having either one of you be the spokesperson for this. The new chair for the next 2 months, unless it's somebody who's done it before, is going to be in for a significant learning curve. And so I think it just makes sense in order to keep this process moving and to also allow for whomever the chair is to settle into that role. I feel perfectly comfortable having the two of you be the spokesperson, and then making sure that you're appropriately triaging so you're not doing maybe work that you don't need to do, or maybe there's somebody else who can do it, so that we don't overwhelm every person sitting around this table.
Again, I just want to clarify, because it was a motion and we all voted on it. Then, as I see it, and you chime in then we're actually the chairmans of the search committee. We're not the liaisons. We are chairing the search committee, which then means we are the ones that would come to a meeting like this, and it would be Alana and I conducting the meeting, because it's dealing with the search committee. It would be Alana and I working with Tim and Katie. It would, and apart from the board chair. And every time there is a superintendent search, either meeting or agenda item on our regular board meeting, it would be Alana and I conducting that information. Is that what we want to do?
In talking to other school board that have had searches recently, I was at the legislative agenda, or delegate assembly a couple weeks ago, and made a point of talking to a number of school districts. And so some of the school districts who had someone other than the chair be their liaison, or they call them different things, they did say that it's really important that you're also involving the chair, whoever the chair is. So I don't know what to recommend. I just will say that it is common that, and you've had some experience as well, that the vice chair or somebody else on the board is chairing the committee, but you really do need to involve the board chair in setting up meetings and things like that. Not doing it, but just for communication flow. I don't know if you want to speak more to that.
Can I just chime? Well, if we're chairing the search committee, then we would be including everybody. So there's the board chair, and then the chairmans of the search committee, and we would involve the board chair along with everyone else. And in the roles that we're discussing right now, the board chair would be just like any other member during search committee issues. Would be. I'm just trying to delineate, and then again, does that preclude Member Oswald or Member Lofald from being a part of the board leadership next January? Do we then pull our names out of a board chair or a clerk or a vice chair because we're chairing the superintendent search? Do we then not be able to do dual roles is kind of my question. And I'm fine with that as long as that's an understood choice that Member Oswald and I are making. Because if we're going to chair the superintendent search, if my colleagues say, then you will not be the clerk or the vice chair or the chair, then I want all of us to know that before we go into the January meeting. So.
Go ahead, Kathleen. And then Member Trinka and Member Oswald.
This is getting a whole lot more complicated than I'm accustomed to, actually. We're not looking for committee chairs. We're just looking for a person to be able to say, the board is thinking about this, what kind of feedback? Or can you do this? Or when you get together. It's not that complex, and I apologize if I've made it sound complex. But we always have a liaison, always, from the board. It is typically the person that you voted in as your leadership. And I know that when we communicated, there was a little bit of confusion, which is why I raised the issue today. But I don't want you, we're going to be conducting the search for you. We just need input direction, which we're going to get today. If that, it doesn't need to be that difficult. I don't want anybody taken out of contention for anything. It just is pretty straight. Just need somebody to talk to us if there's an issue. And then we just need to go to some other people, and I think we pretty much know who those people are now.
Thank you. Member Oswald, Member Trinka? No? Okay, and then go ahead, Member Oswald.
I was going to say that Member Lofald is voicing some frustration. I can hear, but just wanted. If you talk to me, when you talk to me, I think I have a clearer understanding of how to do it and how to answer your questions. And I think Member Lofald and I will get on board with each other once we talk a little bit more. I've been unavailable due to my illness, and so now that I'm back and doing well, I will be fully involved. So I think we have, between the two of us, we have the capability to answer just about any question that you have or know where to get the answer. And it can be really simple. As far as a committee, you guys just trust us, and you voted to trust us. And of course, we're going to communicate with the chair, and of course, we're going to communicate with the rest of you because you're all going to be talking to us, and we're all going to be working together really hard to make this happen. So, I think, as far as I'm concerned, we can move on.
Okay. Did you?
Oh, thanks. No, I think that I don't see it as a committee, but I do agree that if you're looking for clarification or a spokesperson to tell you what the board might be thinking that you're unclear of, that Jill and Alana can do it. But I think it's a board function. And it doesn't preclude you from running for anything anytime, so, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Member Oswald, and then we'll move on. Or, excuse me, Member Lofold? Okay. Thank you. And then, again, a huge thank you to Jackie in Melinda's absence, just doing a lot of the coordination, and she'll be that key contact for a lot of logistical stuff. Okay, thank you.
And she's been great so far. It's been a pleasure. Next on our checklist is setting and finalizing the calendar and the timeline. I'm going to put that off, and we're going to do that at the very end, because I want to go through some things, and the process will kind of unfold for you so that you have a better understanding, and we'll come back and see, starting with the end in mind, when you want to have the selection. And as we go through this, you'll see all the involvement, engagement you all will give us direction on, and how much time that's going to take. Does that make sense to you? Okay, good. All right, so I know that you have had discussions with regard to budget parameters, and I know you hired us. I just want to make sure that Nick and I do not violate any of those parameters. We're going to try to be very budget conscious about when we come here and when we meet, but I just want to make sure you provide that for us so we can stay within it. Or that when we lay out the calendar and you get an idea of when we absolutely need to be here, you know, there are times we can do what we call Zoom, which is a conference. We can do that. We can be helpful in that regard. But there are some times where, particularly when we get down to the focus groups, things that we're interacting with people, it's a little difficult when you're not in the room. But we can do a lot of that. So if you'd rather, you know, we just want to have a clear idea. This is it, so that we can say, okay, where are we, when are we, etc. Or if you'd rather wait for us to go through everything so you can see where we probably need to be present, that would be a good idea. I see some nodding heads. Okay, good.
Member Trinka, and then Mr. Swirsky.
And maybe Mr. Swirsky is going to speak to this.
Yeah.
As treasurer and business committee chair, I think once we go through this, we can have a better idea of a breakdown. And then if board members are okay with it, I'm really comfortable sitting down with the CFO and putting together a spreadsheet. We both love spreadsheets. That includes the parameters and the work that's going to do, and then I think we can indicate in there when we want you here in person, yes, and when we're willing to, when it makes sense to do things remotely, and then we can do kind of a do not exceed without board approval threshold.
That's
if
perfectly
that makes sense.
fine.
Okay.
We just want to make sure out of the gates we're all on the same page and we honor your expectations. That's important to us.
Okay, Mr. Swirsky.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up when we were going through the selection process and kind of working off your proposal, we had the consulting fee, which I believe was about $20,000. Expenses, we understand they're going to be district paid, and we threw in an estimate to $5,000 to $9,000 at that time. Advertising, we threw in an estimate of about $4,000, and I think that might have come off of yours. So we're kind of looking at, with that total, with a range somewhere between $29,000 and $33,000.
Okay.
$1,000, yes.
Well, you'll be making some decisions this evening in terms of advertising and those things, and when we look at the calendar, you're absolutely right. We're going to decide when it's critically important for us to be on site and when we can communicate you off-site, and we're amenable to that. Okay. One of the strategies that we use to make sure that all stakeholders in your community have an opportunity to weigh in on their own personal views of what's important with regard to seeking your next superintendent. is providing on your website a survey where we will create the survey based on some input that we get. We're going to talk to you a little bit about that. We're absolutely not expecting you to create a survey. All right, we will do that. But we want to kind of tell you the things that we've included in similar districts that have addressed or had ongoing issues very similar to what your school district and your community may be experiencing. And we first of all would like to know, number one, do you have an interest in posting an online survey? We keep it open for a select period of time. Your communication coordinator would generally, and this is where we'd be liaising, if you will, would send an email alert saying, I'm guessing you have one for your parent body and anybody else who signs up, saying we are posting a survey for you to be able to provide input to the Board of Education with regard to the next superintendent of schools. We collect that information and then we will provide that information to you in a written report. This is what the key indicators were from this report. And we first of all need to know if you're interested in posting such a survey, because we'll want to get on that and we'll want to get it up on your website if that is the case. And if you wish to have it in a language other than English. And I had been talking to Jackie that we do not have the capacity, for example, when I was talking to you at the presentation, and I wasn't sure I pronounced it correctly then, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly now, so pre-apologies. The Ojibwe, is that it? I don't know anybody in the world who could translate anything into Ojibwe, so that's just an example, but we would need to know what is critically important for you in terms of languages, and we may need some assistance from a liaison to assist us with that. So the first question is, are you interested in having a survey where literally everybody has an opportunity to give you input? And that includes your stakeholders that don't have children in school, the people that support you financially. I think that's critically important, that you look at all of your stakeholders, and that is at least one way, I am presuming, as most libraries do, that people could have access to a computer at a library. I don't know how in other places that the community would be, but it really allows people an opportunity to everybody, because not everybody's going to be in the room otherwise, to give you some feedback. So the first question is, are you interested in doing that? And then I'll go on.
And before I call on board members, I've just been trying to make eye contact with Katie Kaufman, our communications person. Did you want to come up here for this piece of the discussion or any piece of it, Katie? And then if there's anything you'd want to add about doing a survey as suggested or what we've done in the past. And then I'll jump.
I have a procedural question.
Okay, sure.
Are we going to be making formal motions and votes on these decisions, Jackie? I'm trying to look at Jackie.
No, this is, I think we can do it in a...
Just a consensus?
Yes, yes.
All right.
Thank you for asking that.
Just consensus to give us direction.
Right, but it's still a decision as a board. That's why I had to ask.
Yeah.
Because I'm the clerk, so I have to know if I have to write it down.
Thank you for clarifying that, Member Oswald. Katie?
First of all, yes, we have the ability to post a survey online if you create one. In addition to sharing information via the staff electronic newsletter and the family electronic newsletter, we would also probably consider sharing it in our social media. We have Facebook, we have Twitter.
That's what we were looking for.
We have Instagram. You'd want to consider maybe hard copies of the survey at all of the school sites so that somebody who doesn't have a computer has a way to go to the school and get a hard copy. We could also consider, if we have enough time, to do a direct mail piece that would go out to some of the stakeholder groups just to say we have launched the superintendent search process. You have an opportunity to look at this webpage that we've created. You have an opportunity to weigh in on the leadership profile through the website or through hard copy, with the surveys being available at any school site. And of course the local media, the newspaper, the television stations, some of the radio stations, etc. If we were to share the information with them, they would likely cover it and say, hey folks, the superintendent search has launched. Here's the website, here's how you can weigh it. So there's a number of things we can do, just depending, how far you want to take it.
Katie, that was typical in the past search as well. With the social media we were using at the time in 2011. Yeah. Go. Yeah.
That's fairly typical of community engagement processes that we've done in the past. When you're talking about communication and sharing information, we've got a whole bunch of tools in our toolbox, and you basically want to use every tool in your toolbox for something that's especially as high stakes as a superintendent search.
Okay, thank you. And Katie, thank you also for, on our website, we do have a section, we've had it since March, or the end of March, when the superintendent announced for the superintendent search. So, that's one piece of the work that Katie's been doing. Okay, Member Sandsted?
Yeah, I think we should definitely do a survey. I don't think we need to do a direct mail piece given timelines and cost involved, but every other outlet that you mentioned, Katie, I think would be great. I do think that because it will be open to everyone, I think it'd be a good thing to include a question that would identify what type of stakeholder, if they can choose from a list.
We're going to go through some of the things that we typically ask, and that is you try to get a handle of all the demographic elements of who's responding. It's very helpful.
Great, thank you.
Member Trinka?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions and then, I have 3 questions. One is, and maybe this is for Katie, recognizing that we are required to be adherent to certain ADA laws for our website, would those same laws apply to the survey? So does the functionality have to be allowed to be read to persons who are blind or have vision? You're nodding yes. So are you capable of that based on the survey tool, the online survey tool that you use?
Well, I would defer to Katie. Can you do that?
If you're creating the survey, I can't make your survey ADA compliant.
Okay.
You'd have to make it compliant yourself.
Okay.
So that's a consideration. I absolutely agree with Member Sanson and with, I think, my colleagues that we definitely need to do this. My second question would be around how in the past, when you've done surveys, have you avoided duplication of submissions so that we don't have multiple or 1 or 2 stakeholder groups?
You can do that when you post it on the web page, but if people are accessing the library, there's no way you can.
Right. Okay. And then I'm curious about what your history has been with the breakdown of the data that you provide so that we're able to really be thoughtful in how we act upon the data that we're given, because I'm cautious with things like this about data integrity, and also ensuring that we're really being clear and transparent about where the data is coming from, who it's coming from, how different groups are impacted, et cetera.
We have the opportunity to have an independent contractor provide the questions, collect the data, and give us a printout of the data. So Nick and I never touch it, so you never touch it, and they'll provide the information. And in addition, depending on how the survey is created, and here's the dicey part, you can have open-ended questions where people will respond, but there's a level of subjectivity as to how you interpret a response.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I guess maybe I didn't ask my question specifically enough. I'm just curious about, in previous survey experience that you've done, what type of analytics would you provide us?
It is based on the specific questions that we ask. So if we say, please indicate which apply to you. Let's do this simple piece. I am a student in the Duluth School District. I am the parent legal guardian of a student. I am an employee. I am not an employee. I live within the Duluth community. So it would tell you of the respondents, the number of people who responded to each of those elements. And then there's other demographics. And then lots of demographics with regard to cultural, the primary language in your home. And then you're looking at the 3 most significant strengths of the district, qualities that you're looking. If you have wards in this area, which ward are you in?
I think she's referencing analytics.
Yes, I'm specifically referencing analytics.
Well, what Kathleen referenced, if we utilize a third party, which is not a significant cost, it eliminates any bias that could be perceived by Kathleen and I, by you, the board. It's a third party that would administer and do the analytics back to you, the board. So it would be without bias. And those analytics then would tell you by demographic, the responses to give you feedback on not only the qualities that your community is looking for in the next superintendent, but who they represent in your community. And the volume of interest by area, by constituent. So those analytics are pretty foolproof because there's no bias that can be.
Which analytics?
Maybe Kelly has a better way of, I'm just not wording this correctly, and so I'm guessing Kelly knows what I mean.
No, I mean, I think so we're really talking about qualitative versus quantitative.
Oh, okay.
Right? So.
And the ability to layer data.
And to be able to layer data. But so before we figure out what sort of analytics we want to figure out what we want to get from it. Right, so are we looking thematically, like what are themes that we're looking for in terms of a superintendent? Like themes, or are we looking for, data that I would think of that you're going to write a paper? You know what I mean? Because I'm not sure, just because this is a survey going out, we're missing a lot of controls and a lot of things that I think to do the analytics would be really, really difficult. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you. Kelly, did you have something else, or were you just?
No, I was just going to say, I think before we figure out what we need to figure out what we want out of this, and then I think then that piece comes in, then we figure out, okay, how do we analyze it from there? Exactly. I think we figure out, does that make sense?
No, that all makes sense.
Okay.
I get that. I'll figure out how to articulate my question.
And sorry, does that make sense? Okay. I didn't mean to say that.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Member Kirby, who has done a lot of research, go ahead.
I have done some research, yes. I suggest, Member Trinka, that you look at the Madison Metropolitan School District website, because BWP was hired by them to do a superintendent search, and they're currently doing it. And there's an example of the survey and the responses and the assessment of it there. And I would assume it would be the same kind of thing. And so there's an example.
Correct.
You can see exactly what they do. So Madison, Wisconsin, yes.
Member Lofold?
oh, you guys, we're going to have a good, I think we probably want to know, so BWP says they're going to do this survey for us. So we have to, so I think somewhat we won't, you've got to tell us what you would put on that survey, and then we'd have to see if those are all of the questions you want. Is there some questions you want on the survey that are going to get to some other issues? Don't you want to know what all they're asking so that you could answer whether or not it's getting to what we want on that survey? Or is this generally just give us your ideas about what you're looking for in the next superintendent?
I think that's the question, is what's the purpose of the survey? And I think the idea is we're going to create that together now.
The purpose of the survey is to create a profile of the next superintendent you would like, and that is used as our tool to recruit individuals that meet the profile that has been developed, and to use it as a measuring stick for you. Remember, I talked about having a rubric for you to determine which people are going to be the best candidates. The profile is everything. This is the type of individual we are looking for. And that's the essence of what every customized survey gets at. So, for example, if equity is a huge issue in your community, which I believe it is, then the survey is going to have to get to what qualities must your next superintendent have so you have an equitable, fair environment promoted, created, sustained, etc. So all we need from you is to let us know what are some of the big ideas that need to be addressed so that we can create that profile for you. And that's just everything in us posting the position on all these different advertising potentials. This is what we're looking for. And it's not just you, it's your community saying, hey, Board of Education, this is what we are communicating to you is important to us. If you choose to have focus groups, people will have a voice there and we'll provide a report to you. And you put all of that together and we're going to provide for you a profile, a starting profile that we will bring to you saying it would appear that after we have gathered all of this information, this is what your profile looks like, and we'll discuss that with you. And you may say, whoa, wait a minute, let's talk about this, or I don't agree with that, or I think we need more of this. Not that I want you to wordsmith, but I'm looking for the big ideas for your next superintendent of school that profile needs to have, and that's what a survey gets at.
So just to clarify for what you're looking for from us right now, it's that we want to go ahead with this online survey, that we want it posted in numerous different ways, and are you going to be asking us more specific questions about what's on the survey, or the survey is... What else do you need?
So typically, we try to isolate the who, the demographic, to let you know who's responding to this and how is that group responding. And then we're looking at pretty much research-based qualities of effective superintendents and people prioritizing them. So for example, the three... I'm looking at the wrong one, excuse me. 3 of the most important characteristics to the person completing the survey that you would like your next superintendent of schools to exhibit. And it can be such things as commitment to the community, commitment to social justice, integrity, racially conscious, innovative, team builder, change agent, risk taker, negotiator, visionary.
And do you generally use, for the most part, this same survey, no matter what district you're in?
Some questions we do, some we absolutely do not. What I just read to you came from a survey I pulled from a very diverse community, very diverse, grappling with a number of equity-related issues, dealing with a number of communication-related issues between the administration, staff, the board, the community. So there's other leadership skills that we highlight, and I pulled this one because it very closely resembled in what I have been able to pull from your media, what I have read online, from your website, from your vision statements that were created when your current superintendent arrived on the scene. But if there are any key points that you want to underscore individually or collectively, please make sure we get to this. Now, we will pull it together and then we will run it by your liaisons to say, did we hit the mark?
So for time, since we're breathing on 55 minutes, would the board like us to draft an online survey, get it to the liaisons, and then you can look at that and say, yep, these are missing, these are there, this looks good. Then you can give us feedback. Sometimes boards say we don't want an online survey. Do you want an online survey?
Yes.
We'd recommend it. You're saying to your community, we're reaching out to you to have a say, not a vote. And that's significant. That's significant that you're reaching out to all your community members, parents, teachers, kids, business leaders, etc., saying, we value your input. So we'll get you that survey draft to the liaisons. You can look at it and say, yep, that hits the mark, or can you tweak it a little bit here?
All right, Nick, you may
Thank you.
get us through the rest of this agenda.
I just want to add one other question you ask of us, besides all the different ways Katie talked about notifying. I think if we can do a direct mail that's inexpensive, I think that is really important for a segment of our population who still relies on mail and so I would recommend if we could do that we have some kind of direct mail piece. I think particularly for older members in our community, that's still an important communication tool for them.
And that's strictly your call.
Can I just clarify before we move on? So you're going to draft the survey. You're going to send it to the liaison team. The liaison team is going to send it out to everybody and collect feedback. And none of this violates the open meeting law. I think that's a question, but I'm comfortable with that so long as it's not a problem.
Okay.
Your liaisons will discuss that.
Jackie?
So is it a board decision that you want to do a direct mail? You said yes, but I didn't hear board.
Yeah, I threw that out there, waiting for a response.
Call.
Yep. Member Trinka?
I think it'd be interesting to get a financial breakdown of what that would cost us, as well as, pardon? Yeah, who would be included and then what the timeline is. I'm a little bit concerned about that, but I agree that including that those groups that's important, but I think we need a little more information.
It will cause a hit to your timeline because if they're done by hand, somebody's going to have to get those and turn that into analytics. And that could take some time.
Maybe
Member Oswald and then Member Eder.
I agree that a mailing, especially to our community that may not have a direct tie to somebody in our schools, they still get a say in their superintendent, and I think that's a way to engage community members that aren't so in tuned. The response rate from them, I don't know what we'll get, but we should try our best to include everyone. And I, as a liaison, can volunteer to data entry those ones because I'm quick at that. So.
Member Eder?
Just, is there a spot where we can make sure on the survey that there's a place for an open-ended question that just says, is there anything you feel like we haven't addressed in this survey that you...
We always add an open-ended question, but that's when I was responding saying it's going to be subjective to how you're interpreting what the person meant, because I've read many of these and they're not as straightforward as you might think, but we do, and we'll put all the responses together.
And then the second piece being, I'm a little wary of a direct. I understand the importance of making sure that our entire community is contacted, but that does put that will affect the timeline, and I'm not sure you want a whole piece of data entry when it comes to feedback from a direct mail, because then that's also a time stop in the timeline. So I think we really need to very seriously think about how we want to reach that segment of the population, but that's that could turn into a really onerous and delay the timeline quite a bit.
Katie, how have we handled that in the past? Did we do a direct mailing in the past? And how was it handled if we did?
Direct mail piece to staff and to families could be turned around fairly quickly. If you're talking about, let's say, for example, we did a couple mailings to property tax payers during the last levy referendum campaign. That takes longer and it's more expensive to do. And it's, I'd say ballpark, maybe $15,000 to do direct mail to all property taxpayers.
Member Lofold?
So I was going to say, I think it's pretty pricey just from our experience in our campaigns and doing that kind of, but I'm confused about what mailing what a mailing exhibits. Could you just send a postcard to property tax holders, just a postcard that says there's an opportunity for an online survey, here's the website, there's also hard copies in your schools, and you just simply do a postcard? Is that the kind of direct mailing, or are you thinking that you're sending the survey out? Whole survey.
When I was thinking of it, I was thinking it more of an informational, kind of like we have done doing, say, a referendum campaign that gets people to a site. No. Anybody else have, okay, Member Sandsted?
I think sending the whole survey would be cost prohibitive, whatever group we're sending it to. And I think that the message will reach voters of where they can find the site through our website, through our announcements, through the local news. It'll get out there. I think that it's an unnecessary cost to do a mailing.
Not to belabor this, but I would imagine we could have our print shop print up a bunch of handouts or a bunch of postcards, and you could either give them, people could have them in school buildings, I don't know, and you could put them in shops or businesses or that you thought maybe someone would pick up. Maybe we're grocery shopping and we can stuff them in bags. I don't know,
Okay, so just to clarify, back to the survey, so you will do a draft of it. It will go to the liaisons, and the liaisons will send it out to us, but people should only respond directly to the liaisons, not to the group, with any comments. Okay.
I'm going to direct your attention to the 4 parts of the search process. I think that will guide us through the rest of the high points that we would like to obviously garner your feedback on. we've covered some of this already. We'll get to the timeline in just a moment, but advertising. If you look at those 4 bullet points, those are some suggested areas from us to advertise Minnesota Association of School Administrators, American Association of School Administrators, Ed Week, National Alliance of Black School Educators, to get this posted far and wide, and the associated costs therein. And we can also do it on the ALAS, Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents, as well.
Thank you. Member Trinka and then Member Sandstead.
Member Sandstead was actually first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Member Trinka.
See you right there. Okay.
I'm wondering if you would start that sooner than, I looked at the timeline and saw that, we don't, the leadership profile is approved mid-January. Would you be posting now something vague, or would you be posting this after that point when we're really opening the applications?
What we can typically do is, if you so chose, I have created an initial, Nick and I created an initial posting, just announcing the vacancy, saying a little bit about the community. I believe it was forwarded to you for your input with regard to the size of the district, the amenities of the area, without getting into the details that you haven't gotten the feedback on. So you can certainly do that. It's announcing the posting. The first place we would put it is, with your assistance or approval of the original document, is we put it on our website. And typically individuals that are searching for a superintendency go to the key search firms and they'll go online. We want to get the word out there, and the sooner the better. If you wish to do that with any of these specific organizations, we can do that too, and then we will usually add more specific information will be forthcoming. Continue monitoring this site.
But we would recommend getting out sooner than later, to your point.
So I see that on page 2, you do mention ALAS, and thank you for bringing that up again. I would say definitely makes sense, I think, to advertise with that Association of Latino Administrators as well. Are there other groups that you're aware of, or would you be willing to do some research on other similar groups that are representative of other marginalized communities? That's my first, that's my question. And then I say let's get this thing out right away. And it'd be helpful if maybe you said check back mid-January, or if we have like a 3-week timeline or something, because I, as a person who's not super organized, I put those things in my calendar and then they pop up. So maybe although we want a superintendent who's organized, so I'm not suggesting that, but just giving them a little bit of a time frame so they know when to check back.
Right. The American Association of School Administrators, I would say, is a key, because most superintendents will join that organization, and that's where most seekers will definitely go. They'll go to AASA. There are more marginalized groups. For example, the Association of Latino Administrators has joined with the Indigenous Peoples Organization, but they don't necessarily have a posting site of jobs that I could find. But we can certainly, without any problem whatsoever, send it to any marginalized group that you can think of off the top of your head to make them aware. So I know that you have those populations here. That's why we listed them. That's why I also said other. If there's another group of people that you feel we need to get the word out, please let us know. We'll investigate it, and then minimally we will send them some information. And likewise, I'm sure your communication director, Tim, can share some sites that they use as well.
And we'll send them out to all the sites that we know of with no cost,
Right.
that we're members of. And with my equity work, I can send it out to a number of sites that don't post jobs, but I can get it to our listservs.
Yeah,
to
for example,
to get it out in front of them.
I will be attending the Midwest Superintendents Association conference in January, and we bring in people all from the Midwest, but they don't post job positions, so I'm going to recruit for you. So, and it is a cross-section of diversity because a lot of people come to that who wish, are always looking at different opportunities that present themselves. So if you can share any groups that you work with, but I know that there are specialized groups through AASA, which I was a very active member of, and we can at least let them know, and they can forward it to their memberships, as I was highlighting with the indigenous people.
So you're looking for direction with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are listed here that we all want you to.
And I'm not suggesting that you have to use them all.
Okay.
As again, I don't know where your budget is. I don't know how much outreach. For example, Ed Week is pretty expensive. And AASA normally will link with the Minnesota Association of School Administrators.
Yeah, we're looking for your guidance on cost.
Just if you tell us where you want the posting, what's important to you.
Right.
Can I ask about Ed Week? Is a very steep cost per week.
It is very expensive.
Would somebody looking for a superintendent role look at Ed Week and nowhere else?
No.
No.
Okay.
They would go, I would, in my experience, everybody will go to AASA.
And everyone in your state will go to Minnesota, and if they're out of your state, they'll go to AASA.
I think for me, I'd like to do everything but Ed Week. Makes sense to me.
Member Oswald, or Member Lofold?
Are we typically looking at a 2-month posting if we are going to get this up in January, or is it just 1 month? Because
I wouldn't do 2 months. Your time is
I wouldn't either.
here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think the other sites that you have said that aren't on our list are going to be a cost?
No.
Okay. So if we've estimated $4,000, we're
4 to 6.
We're under
right?
that significantly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
I
within
think
that budget.
Member Eder, and Member Lofold, and then Member Eder. Excuse me, Member Oswald, and then Member Eder.
Do you plan on, or do you typically provide any feedback as to how our postings are doing or how many inquiries you're getting during the process, or is it all just at the end?
We can let you know how the applications are coming into the liaison. Certainly we can.
I think that would
We
be
just won't
vital
be
information.
sharing that
Right.
information with you.
Right, that's typical. I know Member Lofold here has a dream of 70 applicants, so we'll see how close we could hit our target.
Okay, thank you.
And I agree with Member Sandstead. I don't see any reason to waste some money on Ed Week when money's a limited quantity here. So, and I understand we have other advertising costs besides this, so we don't need to spend the full $4,000 here. So, but yeah, so I think that's the more free sites we can get, the better. That actually get traffic. I don't want our posting on some third-rate sideshow kind of website, but quality, reputable websites.
Okay, thank you, Member Eder.
I just would like to, and I think the board would be on board with me on this as well, is making sure that if you can look for a separate association or a job posting site for Indigenous educators, that would be something I would like to happen. And then you did speak about doing the going to the Midwest of superintendents. Are there other conferences, or are there other sort of areas where you'll think, or conferences you'll be recruiting at in that? Because that's really where a lot of work is going to be done.
Yeah, there is. And it's all about timing. So that's why we need to look at the calendar to see should there be any available during that time span.
Okay.
And Midwest is early January.
Okay.
So it's a perfect time. Perfect time.
All right. Thank you.
I just connected with the Native American Alliance out of DC I presented on equity in Orlando this past week, and have their contact information. And I'll be at the Wisconsin School Board Association meeting in January presenting on equity and being there for 3 days. So that'll be a rich opportunity as well.
As Nick said, he's very involved with being a key speaker and providing information. He's probably doesn't want me to say this, but he's going to be published very soon regarding a very key topic with regard to equity. And we had talked about this, saying, Nick, your contacts at all of these special group meetings can be invaluable, and he's already been recruiting individuals. I'm sorry if you didn't want me to say that.
That's okay. So we will, to Board Member Sandstad's point, is the board okay getting that posting to these organizations ASAP? Okay, good. I mean, so that we've obviously launched the recruiting efforts to get to number 2 there.
Can I ask a clarifying question about that? Because
of course.
You've got lists on 2 different pages, and one of them has the Association for Latino Administrators and one does not. So I just want to make sure that we are including the Association of Latino Administrators, especially since you're saying, Kathleen, that they've merged with the Indigenous. I've got 2. I see it. Oh, okay. All right. So I just want to make sure that we add that's included.
Yeah, for clarity, let's stay on the 4 parts of the search process page, and they are included there. Thank you for pointing that out.
No, it's there.
It's on both pages?
Yeah.
Okay, well, good. Okay. So we will post initial, open the web-based application system, which will go on BWP site, start getting candidates applying. And now, again, the next item 3, community engagement, which we kicked around with a survey pretty thoroughly, which is good, because it actually is going to save time in this part of the dialogue. We suggest individual interviews with each board member. Kathleen and I will divide and conquer that. Will the board be interested in that? Probably due to proximity, I would suggest Zoom conferences. I'm a big advocate of seeing.
Or phone.
I like. Well,
with board members?
Well, what's your preference? I prefer seeing your face, and you see mine, but it's your call.
Yeah. Zoom is good.
Okay.
Okay, good. We'll coordinate that. The next piece is significant, and as Kathleen was saying in the introduction, this is when we're boots on the ground. We're here. And we're going to rely on you to tell us, board liaisons, if you're up to the challenge, I'm sure you are. Stakeholder meetings, employees, students, parents, community members, business leaders, we will be here face-to-face coordinating those, garnering feedback from them on what they would like to tell you about who they want to see in their next leader, and their feedback on Duluth schools. You're going to get a little feedback generally in addition to specific qualities they're looking for in your next leader. So, but we will rely on you and Jackie, and who's? Melinda, to help coordinate those lists to us, and then they can coordinate. This is where the logistics come in, dates, locations, and all that good stuff. And we would facilitate this discussion and feedback for you, and that'll be part of the information that comes back to you as the board as we give you this leadership profiles developed by your people. And your individual interview is highly significant to guide that process as well.
I'm going to add, typically when we do focus groups, we're here all day, and then we open up a time at the end of the day for people who may not have been invited to be part of a specific focus group. If they want to walk in, or they were invited but they couldn't make it at that time, where they can come in and just talk with us. We leave a time period open.
Member Sandsted?
I'm wondering how people get an invitation to be a part of the focus group, and if there is some opportunity for some sort of process-long involvement of community members, because I know, we've discussed that we have a big focus on equity as a district, and a number of our local community groups want to be engaged and have already worked to designate people who would be able to be active in assisting the district with this search. And so how are we going to identify those invited for focus groups, and how can we also engage these valuable folks along the way in other means?
We would defer to you on putting together the list of the stakeholders in those representative groups, and how, if the board chooses to continue to intertwine them in the process. I'll draw your attention to step 3. If you so choose, and again, we're facilitating your process. If you want to have a cross-section of those stakeholders in where it says present slate of 4 to 6 candidates to the search committee and our Board of Education for consideration, that would be a place where you could intertwine them in. Let's say they've been in a focus group. And then you as a board say, you know what, we want to engage a cross-section of our stakeholders on the search committee. That's where you could, I think, meet that interest that you just shared.
Great. And so is that something that we would determine now or not now?
Which part?
Whether or not we're going to expand the search committee beyond the board, and who will be a part of that?
Well, I think the first thing I would do if I was you is put together stakeholder groups and who you want to invite to those that Kathleen and I will facilitate. Then, based upon that, you can sit, and your liaisons could sit and go, okay, from this cross-section, if you want, these stakeholders would then stay on as a search committee to review and be part of that individual slate review process as well. I mean, again, it goes back to, as Kathleen front-loaded, you guys make the call. But how you make the call and who you want to have a say in the process, that's your call too.
So, for example, we have a list of trying to give you a very broad cross-section of representation at these focus groups. So we want students there, and usually you'll ask we'll ask the high school principal or go through the liaison here. We need students that we would like to come together to meet with us, and not just all the honor students. We want a cross-section of culturally, racially diverse, socioeconomically diverse, thinking diverse. We want a broad range of kids that are actually interested. And you would be surprised how interested students are in selecting the new leader of the school district where they go. And I'm predicting you're going to have the most insightful feedback of any group, just predicting. It may not work out that way, But we don't know, and we're not going to insert ourselves into choosing. People were suggesting types of individuals that we think you'd like to hear from. So you make sure, just like the survey, except on a smaller scale. We're looking at focus groups where we can have a discussion, not 200 people in the room coming to a microphone saying, I think. That's not what I'm talking about. So usually with students, we'll defer, perhaps, for parents. You've got people, I'm sure, actively engaged in PTAs, PTOs, you don't want to leave them out, but there's also other groups, parent groups, that you want to draw from. Those are the things that we don't know. And likewise with students, you just don't want to have the student council show up. You want a variety of kids that are going to give you some input. And likewise with all these different possibilities. And so I'm guessing you want focus groups, but we're going to need to do some coordinating because we're going to need to set a date that we're going to do that on. And you're going to want your business partners, your government officials, et cetera, and any other groups you can think of that you'd like us to meet with that can be done in a full day. And we usually meet with people for about an hour.
Okay, so to clarify, it would be a one day where you would come in and we would have whatever lists of people or focus groups of people. One day. Okay. And then
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Katie and Tim, if you want to provide any sense of what happened in the past, just so we can visualize that as well. Thank you.
And one of the things as we get to the calendar that Nick and I were discussing in order to maximize time, we were thinking that quite possibly on one full day we could be meeting with the focus groups. We could stay here in Duluth, spend that day putting together a summary and key points from that and meet with the board and share with you if that would be amenable. So we could maximize our time here and have that discussion with you saying this is what we found from the focus group and at that same time share with you what we discovered in the survey if we can coordinate.
Thank you. Member Trinka?
Yeah, thank you. Katie, you're probably all over this, but I think, and hopefully our partners at the News Tribune too, I think it's going to be really important that we develop clear, concise messaging about just how involved we want people and the ways that they can be involved. So from the online survey to the community forums to our email addresses, things like that. I just want to make sure that we're being really transparent and open with the community about all the different ways that it is open to everyone to participate. And then we'll figure out who's invited into those stakeholder meetings and eventually figure out the search committee. But that's just my request.
Member Lofold?
If you do you have something you want to share?
No, I did want to give Katie and Tim just an opportunity when we've had focus groups before to kind of explain how that worked, just so we can build on that, that's all. Not to say we have to do it the same way, but just so we know what has been done in the past. So, and then Lofold and Sandstead. Thank you.
Well, there's a couple different ways you could do it. Generally, the school board members have all provided thoughts and ideas about who they wanted to make sure received an invitation. A base list was created, go over the list, ask other people what they think of the list, ask for input from folks beyond the board, beyond administration. Examples of representatives who took part, PTSA Council, we could look at the Title I family groups, we could look at the Family Continuous Improvement team members. We have an Early Childhood Family Citywide Parent Advisory Council, we have a Preschool Head Start Policy Council, the Duluth Chamber of Commerce, Lincoln Park Business Group, West Duluth Business Group, Greater Downtown Business Council. Education Equity Advisory Committee, Clayton Jackson McGee Memorial Incorporated, American Indian Education Parent Group, Duluth Indigenous Commission, Duluth NAACP, Community Action Duluth, LISC, Labor, the Mayor's Office. I think in the past we invited Duluth Police Chief to come, the Duluth Fire Chief to come. We asked a representative from St. Louis County to be part of this. We reached out to higher education. That would include Lake Superior College, UMD, St. Scholastica, Fond du Lac Tribal, and Community College. For nonprofits, we looked at United Way, Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation. We could look at Lutheran Social Services, student exec boards, student groups, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA. In the past, we actually invited the publisher of the Duluth News Tribune to be part of this, and I think we invited station manager from KBGR TV to be part of it. But you start with a group, all staff, principals, a representative from the teachers union, representative from the principals unit, cabinet and department heads. We'd want to be sure we invited the Office of Education Equity to be part of it. We'd want to make sure the Department of American Indian Education, other program managers, the person who is heading our homeless program, we'd want to make sure they were part of it. So you start with a list. You start building a list. You look at it. Who are we forgetting? Who are we leaving out? Who do we want to make sure is part of this whole process? So. But you could start with just a basic sort of like, yeah, these are the ones for sure we'd want to make sure. But then keep asking yourself, who are we leaving out?
Thank you. Member Oswald?
I just want to make sure that on your list, Katie, that we have some representation from the townships in the city of Rice Lake, too.
Sure, yeah, we'd add it to the list.
So as we think more of these ideas, it seems like one step of this process is to filter to Katie, because she'll be working closely with the liaisons on as we create the timeline and we get the word out. And then, so both different organizations, but individuals as well, right?
Sure, and I guess the question would be, from a practical standpoint, how many groups do you think you could handle in a day, and then how many people in each group, and then you start building the groups from there.
I just wanted to add, when these were taking place, we used a lot of our resources, the News Tribune, the TV stations, and that to let them know dates and times that these were occurring too, so it got that information out in the community also.
The only thing that I would be cautious of, you're not thinking of inviting the media into each group, because some people are going to be very hesitant to share their open and honest views if they think their names are going to be read in the newspaper. We try to honor the people who are in the room, and we're having a conversation with them, but I don't think at any time we've ever thought that, other than sharing with you, but not by name, this person said this to us. I think you just need to be cautious that if you're looking for honest, open feedback, you can't put them in a position where somebody might come out of a meeting and say, well, so-and-so said this, but it's never going to come from us. And I would hope you wouldn't want what a small group of people is sharing with us to be public information. It's never intended to be that. And that's why, to your question, we try to group them into some commonalities. Business, government, partnerships. Now, if you have so many, you might just have a partnership group. Then you might have a government group. We can do that. We try to meet for an hour with each group because people have a lot to say. I can't ever recall ending early. I usually have to bring it to closure. But in a day, we can start early enough and go through the day. But I think that if you have the umbrella of the categories of people, probably have 7 groups there. And then an open-ended group, But it's, if you feel there are specific clusters of people we need to meet with, that's fine. We've met individually with support staff and then certified staff. Teachers, and so on and so forth. So we would defer to you to say these are critical people that need to have time. And if need be, if there are so many groups that you need to hear from, then we'll just do it in another day. We'll do it in 2.
So you're thinking like 50 minutes and then 10 minutes
Yeah.
to prep for the next, okay.
Yeah.
And I don't believe the media were invited to cover the focus groups.
Yeah, I would.
The media were invited to the public meetings that we had to interview the superintendent candidates. They were invited to any public meetings that the school board had in order to discuss the superintendent search. But the focus groups, they weren't considered a public meeting.
Can I?
Thank you for clarifying that. Member Tim, did you have your light on? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear, I wasn't talking about inviting the media in. I was thinking of using the media to let them know, get the word out about the meetings.
Right, okay. Member Sandstead, then Member Lofold.
So I'm looking at the second part, the community forums, and I'm wondering if that's what you're referring to as the open meeting at the end, essentially, that you would do stakeholder meetings to start the day. You'd have. Can you turn your light on? Thanks.
The focus groups are focused groups of individuals. And then a community forum is just open up. We're going to have 2 hours, let's say, at the end of the day. And if you want to come in, it's not going to be formalized. It's just going to be drop in and share, unless we have so many people that come that will organize it a little bit more so we don't have a great deal of redundancy. And we never know, sometimes you'll all of a sudden get this swath of people. It's more like an open house, if you will, just to allow people who weren't part of the focus groups to come in.
And ideally, how many people do you have in each focus group? And I'm sorry if you shared that already.
Well, I don't know what your experience has been, but I've had 25 maybe.
I mean, it varies, but I've had some groups 10 or 12, then I've had 25 to 30.
Ideally, though.
Well, ideally, you always want a group between 13 and 15.
Okay.
Ideally.
But we don't always get that.
No.
Okay.
And you don't want to offend, so that's why, I've worked with districts that didn't wish to offend, so we had large groups. But the more people in the room, the less opportunity they have to speak is all.
Okay, thank you. Member Lofold?
So I would really encourage us to think about having a 2-day focus. I believe, one, that we haven't had an opportunity to have such a wide view of hiring a superintendent. We've had a superintendent for 8 years. Prior to that, it was 5 or 6 years. I mean, this is a big part of our community. Listen to the group. I'm certainly impressed, Katie, with the list of our city. That's a great list. I can't think of someone you missed other than, I don't know if you want to put out the religious community, or of all religions. That I don't know. That just came in my head. But what a great list for us to think about. And so it overwhelms me to think that if we're going to try to do 50 minutes, I think we're only going to get then 7 or 8 groups. And I think that we probably have enough diversity in our community and enough but maybe the interest won't be there. Maybe we'll plan for 2 days, and then once the invite goes out, and once we have people, expressing, or once we create those groups, maybe we're going to find out that 1 day is going to fit because people are busy. And even though they might have a great deal of interest, maybe they're just going to do the online survey, maybe they're going to show up at the end. But I think we could at least envision and try to get them to plan for a 3-day visit and see what that cost is, and set that up, because we'd still want that day where you'd come back to us and share with us, what you found out in the focus groups. But
the other thing,
yep.
I'm sorry.
And then am I still assuming then that even though Katie has this exhaustive list, that it will be the board's work to make sure that we are contacting? Do we just contact someone who is the head of that chamber or the head of that Indigenous group, and they're going to tell us 2 or 3 people, or do we? I don't. Where does that responsibility go?
Good question, Member Lofold. Member Oswald, and then Member Eder. Okay.
Do these community engagement groups also include employees?
Oh yeah, your teachers, your teacher assistants, custodians.
Okay.
If you
it
want,
says employees. That's like the first one.
Yeah. Right, and that was the point I was going to make, is
yeah,
that we have so many bargaining
would cluster into support staff, if you will, and you have representation from each of those groups.
Right, so we have so many contracts and bargaining groups. And,
yeah, you don't need to
we want to
meet
make sure
with
that they get some of their voices
you want
in there.
a representative from your employee groups, which could be one group of support staff.
Okay.
And certified staff.
I think we would have to hash out what those groups would look like and how we can combine them. But
Yeah.
I do think that adds a good half day.
Yeah.
To any prospect of hearing from them, because I'm sure they have a lot to say.
Thank you, Member Oswald, and I totally am in agreement with Member Oswald. Our staff all the way across the board are really key, that their involvement. How have we handled it in the past? Just, again, to build on, not to say that's how we have to do it, but, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think the invites went out to the union leaders and the group leaders, and then they had representatives come in.
That's very typical.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the focus group / stakeholder meetings? Okay. Do you want to go on? Okay. Member Sandsted, then Member Eder.
Member Eder, did you make your point earlier?
Yeah, I think we're probably going to make the same point.
Okay.
Go for it.
I wanted to address, Member Lofold, I think, said, how are we going to determine, or how are we going to break up the responsibility? And I would suggest that the board sort of divide up the stakeholder groups to take point on making sure that there will be enough people from whatever your assigned stakeholder community is to fill that focus group in order to just share the responsibility. That's my thought.
Maybe you can also share with how other districts our size and kind of size of community have handled it. Okay, thank you.
Well, one suggestion would be let Katie's list drive as a foundation for you to consider and see if that represented, and then let that then drive how long Kathleen and I spend here doing it. I mean, the interest is to let them have a say, but it sounds like you have Katie, a great foundational list representing Duluth's community, not only school community, but community at large. And I'd say that could drive to you, the liaisons and the board. There's your foundation list, and then fill in the blanks. That's how I've done it in the past. Because it's about you guys, your community.
Okay. So are we good to move on? I know we have a lot left to go through yet, and we are over our agreed upon time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and item 4 is our commitment to you to identify the experience and skill of candidates that match the profile that's developed, that we'll share with you after we get all the stakeholders and survey feedback to you, which will guide the recruitment. But don't think that we're not recruiting now, because we are, and we should be. What our job then is to get a slate that will then match that profile, but initially we want to get a pool. We want to start talking to people and seeing the interest out there. We have enough information about you to give them a picture of this community. It'll fine-tune then with the leadership profile. So in recruitment, I think we've agreed on the advertisement, how we're going to post it and immediately on our site and the sites that you agreed upon. And then once we get the profile, that'll guide our pre-screening to interview. Kathleen and I will interview them. Obviously reviewing applications and credentials for all internal and external candidates. So that's the recruitment phase that we're, as Kathleen said, that you're charged us to do that, and we will do that diligently. The assessment piece is to review the online apps and nominations from your community. Then that assessment is to find out who is really going to start matching this. They're fine-tuning it down to get you that 4 to 6 candidates to slate. Now this goes back to, I don't think you have to decide this today, but start thinking about, do you want that search committee? My read was sounds like there could be an interest in that. So you can start thinking about that. Representing your community and our Board of Education, how you're going to kind of marry those two. We would provide background information and research on each candidate, including online profile. So that's our commitment in the assessment phase, to really screen and look for not only look for the match, but screen the matches in that assessment phase. Excuse me. Which does lead into the calendar, next page. I think I want to do a backward map on this. If you could say, Kathleen and Nick, we would like to have a really nice welcome in this room to your new superintendent, what would you say that timeline would, when would you like to make that announcement in a perfect world? When would you like to announce your new superintendent? Let's backward map. That's going to guide how we're going to do this.
Yeah.
By the 30th of June. Okay, we got a few lights on, so I'm going to call on the lights first. Member Eder, then Member Oswald.
What is the, I know when you're looking at hiring people for administration in a college and a university setting, there's a timeline and there's a season. When is the season, or is there a season when you're looking at superintendent searches? Or is this?
No, you're as I said in the first conversation, you're in the right season.
Okay, so then if we're in the right season, we just need, ideally you'd like to make an announcement and give somebody time to start to do the work that they need to do to prep for the first day they walk through the door. So
their effective first date's July 1.
Yeah, so I mean, you want to give people time in order to, figure out what they're going to do, read up and learn about the district. So what would it look like? I mean, I don't want to rush this process, but I don't want to drag it out too long. So is there a typical?
Well, what we would suggest, if you go to the last page, is have something. When's your spring break?
It's April. Late April.
If we could get it by the end of March, beginning of April, that'd be a good window.
The other thing is there's going to be a lot of competition out there for superintendencies, and you don't want to drag it out so long that you lose candidates also, which is typically, every search is different, and you can have them at different times of year, but being able to select somebody at the latest by mid-April, and if not beforehand, is probably the best window, because then it gives that individual an opportunity to get his or her ducks in order with their own respective district, their family, etc.
Member Oswald, and then
I'm all for hiring them as soon as humanly possible. I want somebody under contract and know that we have a solid future that we can start building upon. And so speaking to that, has your experience been if we get a superintendent under a contract and they find out they got a different job later, and are they able to break that contract? Or do you see that happening ever, that we hire somebody and then we lose them from a competitive job search?
We have too many lights on, so, okay. Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Nick.
Are you saying you get a candidate, slip the ring on their finger, they sign the contract, then they leave? I've never had experienced that with any searches I've done, no.
Tim, did you have a clarifying question?
I was just going to say, once they've signed the contract, you're good. It's kind of that in-between time where you know who you really kind of want, but are kind of not moving forward fast enough on getting that offer and that contract together.
Member Lofold and then Member Trinka.
Yeah, I was going to chime in with the fact that, you know, we don't want to push it too far back either, because there is this time frame that I have noticed when I've been watching other districts currently hiring superintendents where the board has made a decision, but between negotiating contract with that person and other entities, you know, sometimes we lose them, or we select the 3, and by the time we get now we're down to 2, and what if happens, because we talked about this at our interview with BWP, what if we don't like the 3, and so then we're going back into I don't want to bring up, you know, negativity. I'm all about positivity, but that being said, our spring break isn't late in April. If I'm looking at our right calendar, it is April 6th through the 10th is our April break. So I would say if we could have a candidate, if we could hire by March 27th, March 27th might be our end. That was when we want that. I'm going to say that's good.
One thing I would draw attention to with that, which is along the timeline Kathleen and I proposed, once we hand off to you guys the candidates and you're developing in March, end of February, early March, we present you the slate, then this is your challenge. We're not going to be sitting in interviews with you with candidates. You will be, we'll coach you to leading up to that and talk to you any way you want to kind of, you know, help you get to that process. But once you get to the final slate, you guys will be interviewing them. And that's when you can lose candidates, because that's when it's like, okay, what's the, you know, Tim, what's the package for the person that they're considering? That's where you don't want to lose it in the details. We'll be here to help in any way we can, but we will not be sitting in the room with you doing interviews with the final candidates.
Always just the board.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I do want to just insert this, and I think I did see it in some of your other stuff, that before that point of interviewing, so we also don't lose candidates because of the interviews, we'll want that training and guidance from you. So we want to make sure we build that into the timeline.
It's in there. Yes,
okay, yeah,
yes.
I thought I saw it. Remember, Trinka, your light was on still?
Yeah, it was, and then I completely forgot what I was going to say, which is too bad. Oh, I guess I would just recommend that you guys, I think you're the experts, so if this is a timeline that you recommend, let's do it. As you can tell, we're a chatty bunch, so I'd say I would recommend that you help really drive this train. And so I would say we're really looking to your leadership on this. I really wish I could remember what my question was. But if it comes back to me, I'll send it via our liaisons.
Can someone check when our February break is again? Just
It's February 17th through the 21st.
Okay.
And maybe the end of March is ambitious. I don't know. Now I'm kind of looking at all the different pieces, but maybe not. Okay. Well, what else is going on when is our boundary study due, or when are we having?
Well, we're having a couple community meetings for the boundary study the week of the 22nd, I believe, of January. The week before that in January, keep in mind, most of us will be down at the NSBA conference, so that's kind of going to the week of the 13th through the 21st of January. So, what? Yeah.
Our winter recess starts next week.
So we're kind of diving all over the place right now, and throwing out a lot of this is going on and this is going on. So I don't know, just to bring us back here, if we should plug in right now some of these dates that we're throwing around.
Yeah, that's a point when to make. When are you not available?
Yeah.
When are you at NSBA? So, April what?
No, it's January.
14th to 17th. January.
Oh, January. I'm sorry.
17th is
Did you say
This is your state conference?
state conference?
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, because
We thought you said.
I thought you said NSBA.
Association of School Boards, and I thought that's a
No,
little ways later.
Thank you. So M as in Minnesota SBA.
Yeah, so it's the 14th through the 17th of January, and we have new board members going through training. We got workshops happening, so yeah, that's kind of off our availability. And then you heard February 17th through the 21st is our winter break.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Easter break, or the spring break, is April 6th through the 10th. And then, Katie, can you give us the dates of those community meetings we have for the boundary studies that are?
January 22nd and 23rd.
Other kind of big dates, board members, or?
I would just ask us if we can get, again, really deferring to you, but the sooner we can get dates on the calendar, winter's busy for all of us, and so we can block around it, because most of us who work are booking months out.
The key now is the dates for the focus groups.
I was going to say, those are the deadlines, the
we need to
individual board member interviews and the focus groups.
We can do the individual board interviews, and we don't need to be here for that. We can do that via Zoom, like the 6th through that week, the 6th through the 10th. Yes. I'm presuming December is off the table.
Yeah, that December 16th to the 20th, we need to move back to January 6th to the 10th.
About we're back in school on Thursday, January 2nd, so we do have a couple days at the end of that week. We do have our organizational meeting on Monday the 6th, and so that day's kind of will be taken off because we also have our city.
Well, let's do this. Just tell me which of those dates each one of you could do a Zoom meeting, and we don't need them all on the same day.
Can we email them to our liaisons?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I would recommend that.
Mm-hmm. They're easy, they're fun to do.
So it seems to me there is going to require a great deal of coordination with regard to the focus group planning. Who's going to be there, extending invitations. I'm presuming this is your last week prior to winter break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going winter break. Right.
Yeah, all right. So you're going to need to decide the groups, coordinate the who's, find out who can, who can't. So what did you say was happening the end of the month, the Martin Luther King Day is January 20th, and I'm certain there's a lot of activities going on that date. But what did you tell me you were all going to be engaged in? The boundary?
January 14th through the 17th is the School Board Association Conference and Training.
I'm looking at the following.
Then the next week, the 22nd and the 23rd, is our boundary studies, community meetings, and they've been on the calendar.
Is it possible, Nick, where are you that week?
I'm in Milwaukee the 22nd to the 24th, presenting.
All right. So the last week in January, would that be a good week for the focus groups and to meet with the board? You don't have to be at the focus groups.
Does that leave enough time
Yeah,
for the next deadline you've got on here, which is the close of the search, February 28th?
Well, we would have to change that. As I'm looking at, I don't know when. It's going to take a great deal of coordination after listening to that list and getting out invitations, and we're coming up to winter break. And
this draft calendar assumed we were going to meet with you somewhere around December 5th, so everything's going to be pushed back a little bit.
So listening to boundary committees, state conference, I'm looking at January 27th through the 31st.
Katie, could you look just real quick and see when, because this will be important for our staff, when conferences week are, just so we are sensitive to that with any of our staff. Because I know the end of the semester is in January.
I think Katie should go, but I don't think it's in January. January 27th through 31st looks pretty good, although you could also, Kathleen and Nick just said, we're not present at the focus meetings, except for the one opportunity you have to share with us after the focus meetings.
Yeah.
So you could do focus meetings
that week?
The January 16th, 17th, and if you could stay to the...
That's when I'm at Midwest Superintendent.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you guys are at...
And we're at
You're
the
at
conference.
MSBA
we are,
too.
But
Yeah.
if
So we couldn't meet with you anyway afterwards.
Well, you could, because we're home by the 17th by the afternoon. Yeah. It's done. But that's okay. You're at another conference, so that's not going to work.
We do have our regular, at this point, a regular scheduled January meeting on the 21st. So there is that potential before or after that meeting.
I just don't think following winter break you're going to have a chance to get invitations and get people coordinated for the focus groups. And I'm trying to be sensitive to the individual who's going to be assisting you with feedback and putting these groups together and saying this is where we're going to be and when. That's a lot.
And we need to get that date to these groups. That's always
and you have
been
to
my
give
frustration.
them. You have to give them plenty of time.
Yeah.
That's why I'm thinking sometime that last week in January. And
that really, but even that means that typically for me, I want a month out if I'm asked to be at some important deal. And I think sometimes that's where we lose some credibility and we lose people who we wanted at the table, is because when you only give them a week or two notice. 2.5 weeks I think is good. But that means that we would have to have the list of our stakeholder meeting done by about January 10th.
I'm in agreement with that last week. Do you see anything, Katie, on any, or Jackie, on any of our calendars?
I've got a calendar too in my...
Things going on?
I didn't see anything on the district calendar, but generally what we would do is, do a Google search, make sure there's not a big city thing going on, make sure take a look at the high school calendars. They've got very detailed calendars about what's going on. Take a look at some of the elementary school calendars.
But we should shoot for that, and then I'm looking at January. Report cards are passed out on the 27th of January. I've probably got at least four schools on my calendar, and the music department, and the theater department, and the holidays.
So if we are in agreement to at least look at that date, and then we can really do more of that Google search. I think there's a couple other lights on, though. Jill, did you have anything else? Member Lofold? Okay. Member Sandstead, and then Member Eder.
I guess I want to clarify that date, what that is. I think we're talking generally about the last week in January, but maybe...
Focus.
Right,
Yeah.
but more focused than that. And then I think that in terms of getting people invited to the focus groups, I do think we want to give them as much time as possible. I also think we don't want to put all of this on Katie if that's... and so I go back to what I said earlier about having if Katie could send us all her list, which is a fantastically broad list, and we can add to it, and then narrow down to 7 or 8 groups, and then have, divide up the responsibilities and have people try to fill in individual names to those focus groups rather than to tie with the entities, rather than making Katie do all of that. That would be my suggestion, and I think that's something that each board member could take on a focus group and, do that in the next week and a half, or by the end of the month, which then makes it possible to send out the invitations right away in January.
Member Eder?
So if we, if we end up doing the focus groups the last week in January, how long do we need to have the posting open? Like, is this a 6-week? Do we need 4 to 6 weeks? Or
Since we will have it somewhat posted, we can get to 6 weeks. If we post the general posting right away, we meet with you right away, and we can keep it open a lesser time and send alerts to everybody saying, here's the more specific information, because I can guarantee you, if people see the posting, you're going to have people Googling your community, your website, and then we'll provide the additional information, so that doesn't have to be as lengthy a window. Would you agree, Nick?
I would agree. And I think if we can go back to Board Member Sandsted's point, to do this list thing, which is key to trigger this, get the invitations out early January, schedule the stakeholder meetings last week of January, and your meeting, that keeps us in a good timeline to, as Board Member Trinka said, keep this thing moving.
okay, because what I'm starting to get the sweats about is losing because and being late to offer a position to a great candidate, and then they can't wait, right? I don't want to lose a candidate because we're sort of like...
No, I don't think we're in that position.
Okay, so...
If we're talking about it in, May and June, yeah, but we're not even talking about that at all. No, I wouldn't worry about that.
Member Lofold?
So even though I like Member Sandsted's efficiency with kind of the divide and conquer idea, and it's not bad, although I just can't get my head around it, like, I don't want the responsibility necessarily all on me. I almost think this has to be either a complete working session of the board. I mean, of course, I'd gravitate probably right to a stakeholder group that is involved in education in our community, but I think that I would like to run those names by. I don't think I want the responsibility of saying, well, here are the 10 people I think need to be in this advisory. I know that will just slow the process of, like, who are we inviting into these groups, but yet I don't know enough of, I don't think any of us have that depth of feeder into our, so we have to invite people from the list that Katie said to help us. Like, I would want Yeah, I suppose that's what you do too, is you would take these 4 groups and then it would be my responsibility to reach out to the individual leadership in that group to find out their names. Yep. I still would I think we still need to come together almost as a work session where we divide up those groups then. I don't think we just send to the liaisons what group you want.
And I'm concerned about, who's going to narrow down which of those groups they are, because who might be the 7 stakeholder groups in one, there's a lot of stakeholder groups here in Duluth. There are a lot of stakeholder groups. Okay. Member Oswald?
I honestly don't see it as that complicated. I see every board member can send us names of people they want to see on the search committee or on the user group, on the focus groups. Let me get my words straight. Send us as many as you want, and then we figure out what group they satisfy, where they're in. I'm pretty darn sure that that list has been compiled because it's been used before, and there have been people attached to those names or to those groups already. And so I think the direction we want to know is do we want to use people that have already been involved previously, or do we want new faces and new opinions? That's much more of the question I have. I would much rather have us each come up with 10, 15 people, and it's easy to figure out what day they can meet and what time, and what commonality they can go into. Organizing isn't as tough as it seems.
Katie, did you want to add something in terms of just your experience with this turnout?
Well, just from a practical standpoint, rather than looking at it as a board member is responsible for a group, you could just say, you could map out, we have this time period, this time period, this time period, this time period, and which groups and organizations and representatives are you going to approach, and then each group will have their pick of what time they want to go. So maybe the chamber says, well, I can do 1 o'clock that day, or maybe the police chief says, well, I can do 4 o'clock that day, or maybe the head of the teachers union says, I can do 8 o'clock. So you're not trying to make up groups that are all of similar people. You're giving the people you're approaching some flexibility, because there may be people who aren't even available that day. So.
Okay, thank you. Member Trinka?
Yeah, and I guess I would defer to our experts here on whether or not they think that that's, from a scheduling standpoint, that would make things easier. But what I heard you say earlier, Kathleen, is that there's a synergy in having similar people in the room. So that's the first thing that I want to say. I think we should default to you. The second thing I want to say is I think we're way overthinking this. I think, honestly, we can have a Google Doc. Well, no, I'm sorry, not even that. I think if the community knows that we're doing this, I think those stakeholder groups are all aware of this, and we send an email to one person and say, invite the appropriate person who is willing to speak on behalf of your organization in this focus group, and that's that.
Kathleen?
Yeah, to your point, Katie, I've done strategic planning with over a 3-day period where you have similar groups together, and then you do a mix match group, which is what you're referencing. The challenge is, if I am coming back to the board, I want to be able to share with you, your business partners, your civic leaders, your government leaders are sharing this. Your teacher organization is sharing this perspective, because they will come in oftentimes from very different viewpoints. If it's mix match, and they may introduce themselves as who the players are. I'm just going to Nick and I are going to be able to share, out of these groups, this is what we heard. But it doesn't focus in on the entity that is speaking to you. And we can do it either way, but you miss that piece. And sometimes that piece is pretty important. Teachers may be thinking one way. Students may be thinking, and I can assure you they will be thinking very differently than their teachers do. And it's just good to know, okay, and is there any commonality, and where is it? thus the focus, not just focusing on the superintendency, excuse me, but your community as a whole. You can pull it all together, but it's more than just helping you find a superintendent. As Nick said before, it's also communicating other information that you may find useful in another way, hearing about what your government officials are telling you in ways to partner that maybe you're not, and we'd like a new superintendent to do this, is what I would say. We can do it either way, but you're going to get a mixed match of information depending on how we choose to do it. But it's totally up to you.
I would suggest that if we feel like, as a board, there needs to be a revisiting, that there is the organizational meeting that you all will be having. I will be somewhere else. So that if, perhaps the liaisons with Katie can work on fleshing out a proposed list of focus groups and who's in those focus groups. And if you want to run it by the rest of the board, you can tag it on to that meeting for a final approval, and then the invites could go out that evening, the next day sort of thing.
Just to clarify too, I think in the past, and Katie, maybe you've said this too, but Melinda has generally sent like a Google Doc out to our partner leadership groups and asked them to identify a person available in the specific day and time we need them available. I think that's been a part of the process sometimes. Is that generally correct?
Melinda has helped, like Bill Gronseth, when Bill is running a process, reach out to different groups. I'm sure she used a combination of email and a combination of some kind of a Google Doc.
Okay. Member Eder?
I just want clarification. We're talking about sending the invitation to the group, and then the group is the entity that chooses the individual they're sending, right? We're not choosing individuals. We're going to the group and allowing the groups to choose the individuals.
That's how it should work.
Okay. Just want to make sure that's where we're at.
Okay.
Can I just clarify on that? I think that works when we're talking about the Indigenous Commission. I think when we're talking about a student group, maybe that will work a little bit differently.
Fair point. Member Lofold and then Member Oswald.
I think I kind of lost the train of thought here. I like the last comment about, connecting with, someone within that organization. But, I get a little leery. I've been on a number of our groups, and I can remember Kathleen sharing too that, sometimes we have to really go in and really dig to get the people. So I just want my board members to know that sometimes the best intention was for that person to select these 2 or 3, and then we get to the meeting and none of them are there on their focus group. And I just, that's why I don't want to make it sound like it's complicated or that it's not. It can be easy, but I've been at too many of our districts' meetings where we have sent out a number of invites and we are expecting a large turnout and we don't get it. And I don't want that to happen this time. So that's the only reason I'm being, more determined, is I want our stakeholders to understand how valuable, and if we're reaching out to their leadership, asking for commitment, I want to know that it's there and that they'll be there to hear. So I don't know what that looks like. But the other thing is just to clarify, I know Member Trinka had to go, and maybe some of us have to go, that you are expecting the liaisons to send out a Google Doc soon to get an individual meeting with our consulting firm. And I'm thinking that we'll do it by some kind of a Google Doc, and it'll be between the days of January 2nd through January 8th.
No, I think we said the 2nd and the 3rd in those 2 days, didn't we?
Thursday,
Friday. I was actually just going to clarify that. I had down to clarify, is there time in the week of January 6th to the 10th? I heard that too.
I did too.
I heard those 2 things.
What do you want? I can send out the Google Doc anytime. I did start it on the 2nd because I heard Member Loeffler-Kemp say that, we're back in school on the 2nd. That's the Thursday, Friday, but some families are still traveling and taking advantage of that holiday break. And then do you want a variety of times? Do you want daytime? Do you want evening? We'll give you the option, but what is also good for them as well? Do you think this is what, a 15-minute Zoom conversation, or?
I would say no. I don't think you get it. I'm going to guess it's going to take a little longer than that.
Okay.
It depends on each of you. The second and third, I think there's some advantage to saying second and third, get it out. I can do it, Kathleen.
Yeah.
I think if you want to do that, do a Google Doc, we'll make it happen. That works for me. Works for us.
Time frame?
That was one of my clarifying questions.
Okay, thank you.
And can you meet with 8 of us? Because I think that it would make sense. I would like to have some time with you and give you my input, but I'm going to be down on the 6th, and then Paul Sandholm is going to become a member on the 6th, and I think he should have input as well. So can you have 8 of those discussions?
Sure. I've done that before where a new board member comes on. That's totally fine.
No problem.
That's no problem at all. You just include him in the thing. So that's good. The other clarifying piece that Kathleen, that last week of January, then will be a significant driver.
Right.
Because we want stakeholder meetings, focus groups, and you guys.
Let's go Monday, Tuesday.
When can we get you?
Yeah, when can we?
You guys are
When can
key.
we meet with you?
Okay. Are you talking after the focus group?
Yes,
Okay.
so
Yes.
we can give you some feedback.
Are we talking one day of focus groups? 1.5. So if we had focus groups on the 27th, which is a Monday, and half of the 28th on Tuesday, and then they meet with us Tuesday night, January 28th.
Except we have to pull the information together for you.
I got you. So would you go home and come back, or do you?
No, we'd stay.
You'd stay. Okay.
Kathleen's idea, I think, is a good one. We'd do that, and then we'd stay, and then share that with you while we're here.
But we're going to have to pull all that information together for a comprehensive.
How long does that take?
Depends on the feedback that we get.
Okay. So we would have focus groups on the 27th and 28th, and then what is the 29th, Wednesday, January 29th? Would the board like an evening meeting or a 4:30 meeting, during the day? Can you get out during the day on January 29th? Because we're going to set the focus groups for January 27th and 28th, and then you're going to have most of the 28th and maybe most of the 29th to pull the information together, because you're going to meet with us on January 29th at some point. It's either going to be, do you prefer an evening? Is that a better?
I would prefer later afternoon. We are, Wednesday still is considered a church night for some folks, and I do want to honor that, so.
Well, church night would be then that we don't meet after 6 o'clock.
Yep.
What was I thinking of? Do we need Tim and Katie here, or is this something for only the board?
This is
You're
for
going
you.
to be hearing a report from us.
No, nothing against you guys.
Is it going to be an open meeting?
Yes. It would be open.
Okay.
Sure. The contingent on how many people you get to say, yeah, they're going to be there for stakeholder meetings, we can divide and conquer these meetings too. In other words, Kathleen can do a group, I can do a group. So if we have 14 groups, we can knock them out in a day. We've done that before too.
Okay.
But if we don't, we'll tag team the same groups. I mean, there's flexibility in us getting focus groups done in a day, putting that information together, and then coming back. Let's say we focus groups 27th, we come back and share it with you the afternoon of the 28th. Okay. That's doable.
Okay.
Don't you agree? Yeah. That is doable.
Okay. Let's put it on for the January 27th, and you can do evening focus groups as well, right?
Generally, the focus groups are throughout the day. You'll let teachers, everybody, principals, they will coordinate ways that those individuals can leave classrooms or leave their work responsibilities to come to the group. We will have evening available, but that's when we've usually reserved for the community to come in, the walk off the street because they didn't have a chance to come.
Member Oswald?
Thank you. I've been very patient because that's one of the questions I had is I know in order to effectively reach student voices, you go to the students, you don't have the students come to you. So are you open to having, dividing your time at two different sites during that day?
It's very common.
Very common.
And many times we have done them in the school buildings and brought people in and make it convenient for the teachers, the kids, and the administration.
Sure.
That's normally we're in schools, to be honest with you. That's normally where we do it.
And the challenge for our teachers is we have 13 school buildings plus. Mm-hmm. So we want to make it equitable for our teachers to be able to come there. So I would really hope that we would have a teacher group for after school hours or right after
whenever.
So,
yeah, and your leadership of your teachers, as Tim said, can be very helpful to say, this is how we have an equitable representation across your elementary, middle, and high school teachers as well. I've used that.
Sure.
They know their people.
And I will also tell you that it's been my experience that teachers appreciate being allowed to leave because they have after school responsibilities. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, what works best.
It's just really hard being our city's 35 miles long and getting people there in comp time, and we have a lack of subs and all sorts of logistical issues. So, yep.
Honestly, whatever works
Sure.
for you.
And my other question is more about our community groups that have already identified people, 2 of which are right here. Mrs. Witherspoon and Ms. Johnson. They are NAACP representatives, and so are we going to be creating groups for NAACP as a whole, so more than 2 voices can participate, and these 2 are only are going to participate then and then be part of the narrowing down process? How many representatives do we have? Are we only picking 1 representative per group? Then the disability group also picked 2 representatives. So, how do you choose between the 2 that they've already said here? Those are questions we need to tackle for logistics.
Member Eder?
Again, I think that we need to stay away from language like choose. We don't choose for some of these groups. I think we let them choose. And if we come to the idea of okay, we have this much, so can you please help us navigate this, and what do you think would be, because I don't think we can make the choice. I think we have to have partnerships.
That was poor wording on my part.
Yeah.
It's not that we would choose which one, but we need to. What I'm saying is we need to decide: is there only going to be 1 representative, or can there be 2, or is there 7? Because there will be an expanded group for marginalized communities or something like that. And those are decisions that should be made soon.
Kathleen, and then, I would also just add is we just need to make sure we're consistent with all of the stakeholder groups.
And that's where I was going to go with that. When you invite somebody to represent a group, you're not asking for that person's individual opinion, although it always plays into it. You're asking them to represent, if in a particular instance of one organization that all has a common goal, you're asking them to find out from their membership, I am going to this meeting. What are the key points you want me to underscore and emphasize? That's how you manage lots of different voices. You're putting the onus responsibility on that individual, saying, you have agreed to represent this group. Now it is your charge to find out what that group is thinking and bring it to the table.
I had a question that in talking to some other school districts through their search, one of their stakeholder groups was former school board members. And what's your take on that?
I've had that. It's up to you guys. It really is. I've had former school board members in my stakeholder groups. They weren't in an individual group. They were generally in with community leaders. But I've totally seen that. Again, that's really the local call. Happy to do that.
Just wanted to check on that.
Sure.
Because it came up more than once in the communities, or school districts I was talking to. Member Lofold?
And just to respond too, I think that, you know, some of our community groups are interested, and they're already, you know, sending forth their, you know, people that they know are going to speak for their interests and for their representation in that board. So I would think that there is a general kind of group that is, I don't know, you know, a group that it can be community people, but it can be 25 people, of which those stakeholders that have already identified 2 or 3, they could invite more if they want, or they've already identified 2, and so they'd be asked to show up at that time, that other community stakeholders within the leadership of our city, or a separate group of, nonprofit people. They could be a part. You know, we'd find a fit for, or they would join the group that fits the timeline. They can come.
Okay. So one other just thing about these meetings that I think we all need to, again, be aware of, and this is where kind of Melinda, Jackie, and Katie come in, is that where we hold them, when we hold them, is also going to be dependent on all of our buildings and their activities and that. And so we just need to kind of make sure we have that for our buildings, our community buildings. Lots goes on in all of our school buildings. So just, we need to kind of be sensitive. We're saying these 2 days, and I hope we can fit them in. But yeah, I know, but just, you know, where we need to be sensitive to that as well. That's all. Want to move down, Member Eater, and I don't see any other lights.
I just have, maybe this is a good way to think about it, is maybe we contact the groups, we see how many people respond from those groups, how many people that the stakeholder groups want to put forth for these, and then we figure out logistically what that looks like. And then if there's 1 million people, then we take it down from there, and just go from there. Does Member Oswald, does that sort of address what you're thinking in terms of groups putting people forward? Like maybe we just see the interest level, and then we start getting the groups from there.
It kind of does. I'm just more concerned that we're talking about a single representative from a group, and we already have 2 representatives from 2 different groups. That was mostly my concern, and that, you know, when we're having groups, you know, are we going to form a group of marginalized communities where more people can participate than just 2 or 4 or 6?
Yeah, and I think if we make the invitations and we ask groups to put members forward, then maybe we see the numbers and then we can work from there.
Kathleen, did you have something to add?
Oh, I was just going to say, in all of your groups, you're going to have some cross-sections of a lot of different people. So don't categorize in your mind. All of your other groups should be a mix. So just bear that in mind.
Okay, great. Member Lofold?
Can we go ahead and put, I'm looking at, can we put a date of like January 6th where we are invested in making sure we have stakeholder groups and making them, or should we, or actually maybe it should be earlier than that? When do you want to send out invites to these stakeholder groups, and we're you know, maybe that needs to happen, you know, right after the holiday, like on January 2nd, or yeah. I don't know. Or is that something the liaisons are supposed to work on, is establishing that? Seems to me we need a work session to get this stakeholder thing set. So I'm just asking for a date for that now, like too.
Member Sandsted?
I was just going to say, I feel like, especially if we're doing mass emails, or I feel like that should come from the liaisons, whether, practically speaking, your names are going to be on it, and Katie's probably going to take care of putting together email addresses. But I also think that, if the last list was from 2011, there's probably going to need to be more work done in terms of getting contact information and things like that, which I don't think should fall entirely on Katie. So
I'm not going to speak for Katie, but I guess I don't think the lists are from 2011 because you've used them for other things, right? Yeah. So just to clarify that, I know you keep a really updated list. So where are we at right now with getting through this?
I would say with those pieces of information, we're in a really good spot. And looking at the hour, Nick and I can put the rest of the calendar together and say, look at this week or look at these weeks, and this is what we need from you to decide on another date. The focus group, you deciding the direction we're taking, I think we have a very good handle on that. Mm-hmm. I think we can share a lot of this other information at a subsequent meeting, but this really helps, and thank you very much, Katie, for your input. That's amazing, and you've done an amazing job on your webpage too, which I shared that earlier, but when I first met. So I think we have enough right now to share information with our liaisons and to look at some future dates of when you could meet with final candidates. But we'll put it together. We'll provide it to you too. But this was really great, and you gave us well more than 90 minutes. But you can see how challenging it can be to get on the same page to get you the product that you want. And it's extraordinary that you have such an engaged community that I know will want to help you with this.
And then I would just add again, as these dates start being formalized, we just need to be checking again with Katie and the buildings and Melinda, and I think that liaisons. Nick?
We'll send that draft calendar, and then that should drive the next phase. We have what we need to keep this thing moving.
When would you give the liaisons the online survey questions? Just as a guideline, so I'm aware to look for it, or knowing, I think you were going to share the online survey with the liaisons, and we're going to share it with the board. Right. And get you feedback as to whether or not we feel the questions are the right ones, or if they're...
I can let you know that tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So you should be looking for two things from the liaisons: the January 2nd and 3rd individual interviews. And are we doing timeline starting during the day, into the evening? What do you want? 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock? You're going to set the timeline for January 2nd and 3rd as to when you want individual board meetings. Is it going to be between 9
I think
and...
you can just let us know.
Yeah, I mean, we're working for you.
So you let us know.
Some people may not be able to do it at 3 o'clock.
Now, if we have duplications, we'll work around that.
Should I just leave it open-ended, either 2nd or 3rd, and you tell me the time on the Google Doc?
Yeah.
And we about a half an hour is what you're suggesting of time.
Yeah, we'll divide it up.
And the way Zoom works is, we don't have to be back to back,
No, you tell us when on those 2 dates, and we'll take care of it.
Will someone be setting us up for Zoom? Because I don't know Zoom.
When you give us the times and the dates, we'll set up
a link,
inviting you for a Zoom conference.
And we need a little camera on our computer, don't we, for that?
No. You do it on your phone.
Oh, I could do it on my Chrome too.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And the other thing is then the online survey we'll send.
Thank you.
Okay. So any other, because we do have to do an official adjournment, but any other pieces that Kathleen or Nick, or any other comments by board members?
I apologized if I missed it. What is the ballpark date you're looking at for the online survey, for launching it? Did you have a date in mind, or we're going to roll that around a little bit?
Well, we need to get that to the liaisons this week.
Yeah.
Which would then allow to launch it contingent on your feedback. You want us to put a date on that so these guys get the feedback in right away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that a yes?
Yeah, I
We
just
probably should, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
I ask because we're going into winter recess next week, and once that happens, anything we send out to families, anything we send out to staff,
Forget about
nobody's
it.
paying any attention at all. So.
Well, what if we launch it like the week of the 6th to the 10th?
Mm-hmm.
But that's in line with our new calendar then. Launch
Nick and Kathleen, can you come back to us with, or send out, now that all these dates again, kind of a draft of this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I will send you something that looks like
Okay.
this.
We're going to send you a whole revised calendar
Okay.
for everything we talked about.
But it will look more like this. Not like this, but.
And maybe,
copy.
put draft on it,
Yes.
just so we're all clear.
Put updated
Yeah,
draft.
Yeah, updated.
Yeah,
draft.
absolutely.
Yeah.
How long does the online survey stay up?
We're going to look at the calendar here.
Okay.
Yeah, let us take a look at that.
So that we can go backwards and,
Okay.
because, yeah. It actually it would be up until shortly before we have the focus groups. So we have time to
About 3 weeks.
go through that. So it would be right before. They kind of, I'm sending you into it.
No, not at all.
Okay.
That's perfect. No.
Yeah.
Then there's plenty of time to do it. You don't want to give people too much time or they won't do it. Put a deadline on it, get it done, and then we'll have those back in by the time we're back up here for focus groups. No, that's good. Panic? No way.
I didn't know what you had going on.
No, January, that's good.
Okay.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Have a motion by Member Oswald, seconded by Member Sandsted. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you again for everybody's time and commitment, and again, Tim and Katie and Jackie, and
Really look
appreciate
at
that.
January 6th, fellow board members, or that week of January 6th to the 10th. There's got to be a lot of decisions made, because then we go into that week where it's MSBA conference, and we're not as available. So a lot has to happen. That's true. We don't have cameras.
Okay.